This particular week, two momentous occasions in my life happened way back. One of them, I was born 50 years ago, and the second one, I started teaching 30 years ago. Hence, it's a good time to take stock of what one has done and understood. And I'm sharing with you my favorite painting, George Seurat. Do you know this painting? Yes. You know, the colors that you see are not single dots of that color, but an amalgamation of different colors that give it a certain hue. And to me, my experience with language teaching is like that. I started off as a learner of English, my native language is Spanish, and I learned through the audiolingual approach, good audiolingual approach. If I missed a class, never mind, go to language laboratory, you repeat for an hour, there's your class. Who needs a teacher, right? This led me to believe in the power of one thing, repetition. And the first time I started teaching, I was forced to teach with the audiovisual approach. So there I carried all my visuals with me. And what did I do to my students? I had them repeat till they dropped. Then I was inducted into education in a very exciting moment. All the crazy methods of the 1970s were popular, and I was lucky enough to be able to experiment with many of them. One of them, community language learning, where we recorded students' dialogues that I translated for them, and we used those. Suggestopedia, where we laid back and had fun. And honestly, that was my best lesson in classroom management, because you have to be a real taskmaster to get those students to do something in class and not fall asleep. You can see the guy there. Then I became trained by Caleb Gattegno himself to teach with a silent way. Quite a revelation. I cannot keep my mouth shut. I had to be silent for 90% of the class. But that was my biggest lesson, perhaps. I learned how to subordinate my teaching to learning, and that made all the difference. I experimented with total physical response when I taught young learners, and I had a lot of fun with it. Of course, I was much thinner in those days, and I'm not showing pictures of me before, but it energized me in a totally different way, and I transferred that learning to my adults. But I was still teaching the same thing, sounds, grammar, until something came into my life, the functional notional syllabus. How many of you remember that? I learned to see language in a different way. I learned to see language not in terms of small chunks of sounds or grammar, but and with it came the communicative revolution. We started getting people to move in the classroom, to talk to one another and not talk to me or talk to each other when I told them to do so. Now, in my country, this is still the trend, and as we learned, it doesn't work, because we're importing the methods that we get from countries where we teach people who really need to learn the language so as to eat and survive once they leave the classroom language. In a foreign language situation, our students go home and speak their own language. So a lot has been said about communicative language teaching, but how we do it is really different. One particular application of communicative language learning has been the whole language approach. And that taught me a lot about the power of reading and the power of getting the students to see the written word and play with the words in a foreign language environment, and it's worked very well. If I were to count my successes, I think I excelled at the most, not as a teacher of speaking or listening, but as a teacher of writing. I could really get my students inspired to write beautiful pieces. And this photograph is actually one of my students. But then I became a teacher educator, and all of a sudden I was like Edward Munch. What the hell am I doing here? How am I doing this? How can I teach somebody how to be a teacher when I'm still discovering myself? I'm an unfinished product. So I decided to take the next step. And the next step is something that I have never stopped taking. Because looking back at what I have done and where I have been has given me the same kind of technique that Seurat used to put that painting together, one little dot over the other. And you know what? The colors change. I know that because I teach, students don't learn. I realize that. After all, I came from a positivist tradition where if you taught, they had to learn, right? And my focus went on improving. Improving what? The lives of our students. My people in Uruguay, though I now live in the States, are different, right? This is what one sees when one looks at a classroom in Uruguay. Is it that different from what you see in Korea? I don't think so. You go around the world and this is what you see students do. Yawning, talking to one another. And actually, the hardest task for us teachers is to stop pulling this tug of war of which is the best method, which is the best way to teach. What we need to do actually is stop for a minute and look back. And when we look back, what we see is a threshold. A threshold which will take us to our next step as a professional, but more importantly, as somebody who can make a difference in the life of a lot of children and young people around the world. Who has to make the first move? It's us. We are the ones who have to gather our resolve and step forward in a new direction. And you know what? After all, the panorama is still the same, but the park has changed a little bit. We have new people, we have new inhabitants, and the legacy of what they have given us is what it makes us today. So, thank you very much.